Hey, what's up, guys? This is Marseille, aka the Property Pastor. Thank you so much for tuning into my real estate channel. I am so grateful that you took some time out to check this video out. And we're digging into a new series all about how do you determine your investment vehicle? How do you determine what strategy works best for you in terms of generating wealth, in terms of taking advantage of your own skill sets? And I'm really excited about this series, and we're gonna dig into it. But before we chop it up in this session, I want to remind you guys to make sure you like and subscribe to the video. By doing so, right, you're gonna get notified of brand new content that we're putting out every single week to help you on your journey, right? So we're here to educate you, to lift up your understanding, to lift up your mindset, and to empower you alongside your journey. So make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you share this video with somebody who needs to hear it. So in the course of this series, rather, we're gonna be talking all about the different vehicles to invest in real estate. And some of those vehicles include we talked about buy and hold. Today we're going to talk about fix and flip. We'll talk about wholesaling real estate, right? We'll talk also about what the BRRRR strategy is. And also we'll dig into sub 2 deals, which are creative financing. We'll dig into lease options and even talk about private lending. But today in this video, we're going to focus primarily on fix and flips. So fix and flip. So let's go ahead and jump into it, right? Because as we do this, as we go through this, we're going to give kind of an overview of what each the vehicles are. We'll look at some of the skills you need. We'll also look at some of the pros and cons of each vehicle, and that's going to allow you to really kind of figure out how it matches up with who you are, your particular strengths and weaknesses, your interest level and all that kind of stuff. And then we're also going to give you guys some resources that are going to be beneficial to you as you are digging into and trying to building up throughout that process, right? So let's dig into it. So first of all, what does it mean to fix and flip a house? Right? Just like the name suggests, you're gonna buy a house, right? And typically that's going to be a distressed property. It might need, and distress can mean a lot of things. It could be financial distress, something that you just got at a really deep discount. Distress can mean something that needs a whole lot of work. It could be a house that, hey, is down to the studs, gutted out. It could have mold damage. It could have fire damage. All sorts of things can qualify for distress. Some properties just need new carpet and new paint. It could just be dated. Something that's built in the 1960s or whatever with, pink bathrooms and weird looking kitchens, right? So the big thing is in fix and flips, it is buying a distressed house. And then after you buy that distressed house, you perform repairs and upgrades to that house, right? Modernizing it, sometimes it involves layout changes, kind of just, opening up a floor plan, bringing it up to a modern standard. And then you sell it at a profit, right? And most of the time what fix and flippers do is the focus is buying something that's about 70% of ARV. Now, ARV is after repair value. So what that means is that after it's repaired, what will it actually sell at? What will it sell at? So the whole concept is, right, you buy that distressed property, 70% of ARV, and that means that basically, that's your purchase price and your repairs. And in doing that, you're going to still be under 70%. And then after you get all your closing costs, all that kind of stuff on the back end of sale, you can make a good profit. So 70% is just kind of that lower end threshold. But again, you're going to purchase the distressed house, you're going to perform repairs on it, and then you're going to sell it for a profit. Now, what are the skills needed, right? Because that might sound really good to you, like, man, I can do this in my sleep. But let's look at some of the skills that you need. And some of those are going to involve, deal flow, right? You got to find deals, you got to find distressed properties, and it's not just as simple as just, finding a house that looks run down or beat up and say, hey, I'm going to give you, 70% of this, of what you bought, what the taxes are or what it's valued at, can we do that? Let's make it happen. Great. That's not always how it works. Finding deals is an important skill set, right? So that might be through a wholesaler bringing you deals. That might be through cold calling. It might be through the MLS. So depending on your market, sometimes you can find deals like that on the MLS. Sometimes you're going to be doing that on your own through your own marketing efforts, and sometimes you're going to be working with wholesalers. But you got to be able to find deals in order to work on a property. So deal flow and finding leads is important. You also got to be able to run your numbers, right? So flipping houses is a big part of it is the numbers. It's a numbers game, right? So you got to be able to calculate what you can pay for it. You got to be able to calculate What's going to cost you to fix stuff, what are your materials going to cost, what are your labor going to cost, and then what can you sell, for, right? Can you pull comparable sales in the area, that are going to tell you what your after repair value is. So you got to be able to do deal analysis. And a big part of that is, like I mentioned, estimating a project. How long is it going to take? Because the longer that it takes you, the more money you have in what we call holding costs, right? That could be an underlying loan. Holding costs could be in the form of more insurance, right? If you got to carry builder's risk insurance, which is always higher than regular insurance. Taxes you might have to carry, utilities you might have to pay, that you will have to pay while the property is being worked on, and all those kind of things. So you got to be able to estimate the project. So that's a big piece. The other part of it is working with the contractors themselves. A good contractor is worth their weight in gold. And just because somebody's got their name on the side of a truck doesn't mean they're a good contractor at all, right? So working with contractors is important, being able to make sure they hit their milestones. I've had, good ones. I've had really bad ones. I've had headaches with contractors. That is a big piece of the fix and flip game, is working with contractors, right? So helping them make sure that they hit their numbers, they hit their project estimates, and they hit their timelines, because sometimes, you have certain aspects of a project that may be holding up other aspects, right? So for example, if you got a plumber who's doing plumbing rough in, right? But then you have an electrician who needs to do electrical work, and you schedule the electrician to start right after the plumber, but the plumber's running late. Guess what? The electrician is now also going to be late, and he's not going to probably just sit around and wait. If he had you scheduled to start on the 1st, and you tell him I'm not going to be ready until the 7th, they're probably going to run to another job. So then when you get to the 7th, now your contractor's not ready, or your contractor doesn't know what they're doing. They sell themselves really well. You don't check their references, all that kind of stuff, and they're doing tile work or framing, and it fails an inspection. That's going to cost you time, and it's going to cost you money. So working with contractors is a big piece of it. The other piece of it on the back end is working with realtors, right? So working with realtors. So there's a lot of other things like, staging people, when you're talking about a realtor, making sure that the property is show ready, making sure that it is ready to be sold. The negotiation when the seller comes and they look at the property and they say, well, I like that, but I really want you to fix that cabinet. Or, they look and they say, well, you got chip paint here, or there's the faucet seems to be dripping, or whatever it is, right? Working with realtors, working with owners, or buyers rather, those are all the skills that you've got to be able to have, right? So you may go in and feel like, hey, this property should be selling for $250, and a realtor says, nope, it's only going to sell for $220. Well, but I plan for $250, right? And if you go in and you're like, well, I wanted to be at $250, and the realtor's like, all right, well, fine, we'll list at $250, and then it sits on the market for 6 months, and then you end up back at $220 in the first place, right? That's just all the things that go into it, right? So being able to work with the realtors, getting the property show ready, getting the property, priced accordingly to where it needs to be. All of those are skills that you got to have. All right, so let's look at some of the pros of fix and flips. One of the biggest, draws or the biggest advantages of doing a fix and flip is the fact that it can generate large profits. And that's what draws so many people to doing fix and flips. And that's one of the reasons why you see so many TV shows about flipping houses. All you gotta do is look at HGTV, and there's a whole lineup of different shows of people who fix and flip properties. Back in before the housing crash, folks were flipping houses like crazy, and they were making tons and tons of money, right? So as you're generating those kind of profits, you can use that money to do more flips. You can even use some of that money to invest in buy and hold properties. But I think the biggest draw to a fix and flip is the dollar signs that flash, because like if you buy a property, we'll use our standard example of, before repairs is looking at 100 grand. And you're able to buy it low, right? You buy it for, let's say 50, and you put, 25 into it. And then let's say, for example, you sell that house for 200 grand, right? Just from upgrades to paint, upgrades to, landscaping and things like that. And you double its value, right? You've only put, 70, 75 in, and you're selling for 200. That's a lot of money. That is a phenomenal amount of money. And all of them don't really go that way, but I think on average, I think one of my mentors told me on his average flip, he's probably making $30,000 to $40,000. But if you can do, a flip a month or maybe two, right, you can do pretty well, right? So fix and flips, they have a huge upside when it comes to their profit, but they are not without issue, right? So one of the biggest things, we'll talk about some of the cons, and I don't personally do fix and flips. I do BRRRRs more so, and we'll talk about that in a future video. But fix and flips, while they have a huge upside, they do have some cons, right? And I want to make sure that you, before you look in, you say, I'm going to be a full-time house flipper. I want to, educate you on some of the cons and the reasons that I don't really focus my portfolio or my investing on fix and flips. One of the things is that you can run into some really high holding costs due to delays, right? So if your contractors are behind, or you're waiting, let's say you're waiting on a permit, right? And the city holds up a permit. Every single day, I call it the meter is running. The meter is running. So if you're using, like, for money, if you're using a hard money lender at 12 to 14%, and you have a high cost insurance policy, you are getting raked over the coals. And if you don't have a lot of reserves built up, you could be in a lot of hot water in terms of finances, right? So holding costs in schedule delays can really add up. The other thing, though, and this is probably more important, I probably should have started with this one, but one of the biggest cons for me is that flipping houses is only an income generator, right? It is not a wealth generator. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the moment you stop flipping houses, you stop making money, right? So if you do the, flip in January, you made 30 grand, cool, happy, wonderful, but the moment I stop doing it, I'm not generating any more money. With the buy and hold, every single month, I'm generating income from my cash flow. My tenants are paying me every single month. Now, granted, it's a lot lower, a lot less, right? But at the same time, flipping houses does not generate income, right? It generates money. And if you have to live off of that, your expenses have to get pulled out of it, it gets really costly after a while, right? So the thing about it, is, and people aren't flipping, a lot of folks that are starting out are not doing one house a month. They're doing maybe one house every 3 or 6, sometimes even 1 or 2 a year. So again, it's not a wealth generator. I mean, it's definitely not a wealth generator. The other thing is that you got to deal with retail buyers. So, you're competing with brand new homes. Your property is going to most likely be listed on the MLS. You're going to have a retail buyer. So every little thing with a home inspection report, you're going to have to fix. And it's going to be nitpicky stuff. It's going to be like, hey, that looks like there's a loose brick, down there. Or, hey, there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's chip paint, whatever that looks like. Dealing with retail buyers can be kind of a headache. But at the end of the day, they, that's who your market is. That's who your clientele is. So they're paying top dollar, but you are competing with the best that there is. I mean, as far as the materials, as far as the cosmetics, as far as the landscaping, the paint selection, all of that, right? You're using high-end materials, right? So you have to deal with the retail side. And then the other piece of it, though, is that from a long-term perspective, the market is often timing dependent. So if the market shifts and housing values go down, your ARV goes down and your profit goes down. So if you buy a house that is totally dependent on being sold, and then you come to find out you're kind of upside down in that house, now you're stuck with this property. Now, if you can sometimes turn it into a rental, but if it's an upside down rental, then it's problematic. And a lot of folks, back in the housing crash, 07, 08, 09, they had houses that were foreclosed. They were flipping homes and making a killing, but then they were stuck with houses and the market tanked, right? So, and that doesn't happen every day. So it's not something that you have to worry about. And a lot of folks are talking about a market crash next year. I personally don't think the market's going to crash. I think it's probably just going to correct itself a little bit. But right now it's a great time to flip houses. We just don't know when that's going to stop, because interest rates are super low and people are able to buy houses. But the problem, will happen when the market prices do drop drastically, which I think they're going to come down some. But, flipping houses is definitely dependent on the market. The other piece of it is the tax implications when you sell. So if you understand capital gains, you have short-term capital gains and you have long-term capital gains. So basically with flips, you want to get off market as fast as you can, right? So you want to, rehab, you want to sell quickly. And if you sell less than 12 months is considered a short-term capital gain, which is basically taxed at the same rate as ordinary income. Ordinary income is what you get taxed on your W-2 job. So depending on your tax bracket, and you got 100 grand sale, which is probably not that much. Let's say you got a 30 grand sale, you're in a 30% tax bracket, right? You're gonna have a heavy tax bill the next year when you file your taxes. If you keep the property longer, right? If you keep it longer than 12 months, you are now into long-term capital gains, which are usually taxed around 15%, depending on your income bracket, which is less, right? But then you think about it, well, you may say, well, shoot, I might as well just keep the house for a year. What if you keep the house for a year and you got a private money lender at 12 to 14%? Yeah, maybe you're winning in taxes, but you're losing in holding costs, right? So there are definitely some tax implications when you go to sell a property. But if you have enough volume, right, you just pay the taxes. So it's a con, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker. The other thing about it, though, is that flipping houses can be time consuming and it can be stressful. And one of the reasons for that is there are a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts with flipping houses. So you've got acquisitions, right? You got to find deals, you got to buy deals. You got to line up contractors. You got to work on project timelines. You got to line up funding. You got to do all these things, and you got to oversee contractors and rehabs and whatnot, right? So if you're not a detail person, you're not a good project manager, that could be stressful. That could be extremely stressful. And then on the back end, when you go to disposition, right, you're dealing with realtors. You're dealing with, is your deal going to go through? Is your buyer going to be able to qualify? How do you respond to the inspection report? There's a lot of moving parts with flipping a house. And then on, you got the tax side too as well. So there's just a lot of moving parts with flipping a house that you deal with, right? So for me, right, there's a lot of pros in terms of the financial benefit, but there's a lot of cons as well in terms of what you have to get there. So I don't want you to go into it with eyes wide shut, right? I want you to go into it with your eyes wide open. So you can make really good money flipping houses as long as you flip houses, right? The moment you stop, you are no longer making money. I tell people, if you're going to flip houses, make sure you take that money from flipping houses and funnel it into buying assets, right? Don't take all of that money, right, and just, splurge it and say, I made 40 grand. I can quit my job and do nothing now, right? That's not going to sustain itself long term, because after a while, you're going to run out of gas, right? And you need your investments to take care of you as you get further along down the road. So let's say you are looking to become a house flipper. I want to shoot you guys a few resources. One of the house flippers that I respect a lot, there's a few of them out there. It's a guy named Jay Scott. He's pretty active on BRRRR, and like I said, you guys know I'm a BRRRR fan for starting out. I don't use them as much now where I am in my investment career, because a lot of things are geared towards getting started. But it's still a phenomenal resource, and I highly recommend that you get LinkedIn, create a BRRRR account. It is free, right? And you can take advantage of tons of resources, right? But in terms of books and authors, Jay Scott's a really good one. There's another guy named Mark Ferguson who's also really good. He's got several books about flipping houses. Jay Scott's got a good book about flipping houses. He also has a good book about estimating rehab costs, which I think is really, like I mentioned earlier, a key skill you need to have. Tons of people on YouTube are documenting their journey. A guy named Chris Haskins, who's a mentor of mine. He's a phenomenal house flipper, does a great job. I think that he's a great resource. He's actually local in my market. So, and most of the time you find a mentor, they're willing to help you. They're willing to talk to you. They're willing to look at your deal, all that kind of stuff. So YouTube, is also really good. You can just look up, and you can usually find pretty quickly if somebody knows what they're talking about, on YouTube. The other thing is RIA groups. I think RIA groups are a great resource to reach out to and to connect with, because the RIA groups, they've got folks who are doing it in your local market. And the RIA group, if you're not familiar with that term, it is Real Estate Investor Association. So linking up with a mentor through a RIA group, or folks who, my RIA group does a lot of really cool stuff. Every month they have a different topic. Some months they got stagers in there, people who talk about how do you stage a house to sell. You got realtors who come. You've got people from the codes area that come. Just a whole host of resources that people can benefit from. So I think RIA groups are fantastic. Last but not least, you'll see on the screen, we got HGTV shows with a big strike through them. And the reason I struck through them is that you shouldn't use them as a training ground, because they're fantasy land. You'll look at a HGTV show and see some of the disasters. But then you look at the budget, it's like, yeah, we're flipping $1 million house and we use $20,000 for our rehab budget. Not realistic. So these kind of things, they're dramatized, they're made for TV. So don't get focused on HGTV because it's selling you something. It is there to make you watch, right? It has no care or concern of whether or not you are successful as a house flipper. So stay away from HGTV. I cannot express that enough. But those are just some resources that I wanted you guys to see. I will post some links in the episode notes so that you can see and take advantage of them. But if you got questions for me, make sure you drop them in the comment section. I will do my best to answer each and every one of them. And, I'm here to help you on your journey. And, I hope this has been beneficial to you when you're talking about fix and flips. Like I said, I'm not opposed to them. They're just not my investment vehicle of choice. Will I do a fix and flip? Absolutely. Because I think it is a good income generator. And it's also just another good investment vehicle to diversify as time goes. But that's been today's video. Hope it's been a blessing to you. Hope you've learned something. If you got questions, drop them in the comment section. Thank you again for tuning in. I am just so honored to have spent this time with you. And make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We're going to keep bringing you next great videos every single week to help you on your journey. This has been Marseille, the property pastor. Love you guys. God bless you. Praying for you. And I can't wait to see you again. Take care.